Hi, everybody, and welcome to a Good Governance Academy event in collaboration with the B20 South Africa. For those who don't know the Good Governance Academy, we are an organization that brings thought leadership on critical business issues. And as a public good, we bring together thought leaders on webinars events that you can engage with and ask questions on critical business issues that we all need to have a little bit of information around to better navigate our organizations through this changing environment that we live in today. So for those who this is your first Good Governance Academy webinar, welcome. Really lovely to have you online, and please join us as the Good Governance Academy community uses the reactions. So our emojis are available at the bottom. So give us a clap, give us a heart if you like things. Really welcome everybody. And we also have the chat function open. And as the Good Governance Academy community, we love to use the chat function. So please let us know where you're from in the chat function. The Good Governance Academy has people registered from 167 countries from around the world. Just done the analysis, 50% of which come from the African continent. Other than South Africa, which is our home ground, Ghana is our next most attended. People from Ghana attend our events the most, and thereafter from the United Kingdom. And after that, from Nigeria. So it's really lovely to have a very good African representation in our community. But today, we also have representation from South America, from Brazil and Argentina. But let me introduce the speakers for today. First of all, a little bit about the B20. The B20 is an initiative that runs alongside the G20. And in this year, it's our inaugural year for South Africa to host the B20 and the G20. And the B20 is specifically aimed at advising and providing policy to the G20 for decision-making purposes and represents business from around the world. And today we have 3 co-chairs of our task force on integrity and compliance. In fact, we've got 3 webinars in collaboration with the B20, and specifically the task force on integrity and compliance. And the reason why is because the close alignment between integrity and compliance and the governance of an organization. And so our 3 speakers today are really providing us with a very much an aligned thought leadership for us at the Good Governance Academy. So first of all, let me introduce Maria. Her profile is on the website, and we will be sharing it in the chat function. But Maria is going to bring to us today some thought leadership around technology, and compliance innovation. We also have Uche from our continent, who's going to talk to us about really internal controls and capital markets compliance. And Reynaldo from Brazil, that's right, yes, going to talk to
Correct.
us in this, thank you, specifically around strategic compliance, regulatory affairs, and our hot topic, governance. So without any further ado, please, I'd like to welcome our 3 speakers and then first of all, start the conversation around the role of technology in fighting corruption. Everybody knows that AI is a big discussion item. It used to be cybersecurity. Certainly AI has taken the forefront. But let's talk specifically around the use of technology in fighting corruption. And I'm going to turn to Maria, ladies first. Digital technologies really do present us with a lot of new opportunities in our fight against corruption. Maria, can you maybe share with us how your company or some use cases of how companies can leverage digital tools and technologies to prevent corruption and, probably more importantly, promote integrity?
Thank you, Caroline, for your question. Good morning from Buenos Aires, everyone. Good afternoon if it's South Africa or elsewhere. Thank you so much to the Good Governance Academy and B20 for hosting this webinar, which is, I believe it's super, super important to bring these issues to the table. Going strictly to the question, Caroline, first of all, I would like to make a remark about technologies and digital tools, because years ago, and not many years ago, we thought about digital tools and it was something I would say external, or it was like an outsider. you would think of an idea, you would think of a project, and maybe you would apply some technology or some digitalization to that, whereas nowadays it is something that comes inside out. You would not think of a project or an initiative or something that you would have to implement at a company and not think about some sort of technology, of digital tool, of AI applied to that project in order to make it either more efficient and more accurate. So that's a first big change in the context that I would like to pinpoint. Second of all, of course, and this is something that we've all heard plenty of times, there are a number of advantages of using technological tools and digitalization, such as, in terms of compliance, the possibilities to identify by behavioral patterns like by repetition, by severity, by risk exposure, improvements in efficiency and accuracy in the implementation of compliance programs, management tools, analysis and processes of information in investigations or for investigations, fraud and anti-corruption detection patterns. Of course, the use of these tools, of course, helps the reduction in human error, and there's a huge improvement in traceability and record keeping, right? However, there are also some risks or some threats, I would say, like the risk of disinformation, increased polarization and biases, implications in the labor market. The World Economic Forum has set up some papers saying how AI and digitalization will have an effect on labor markets, mental health issues that derive from those replacements or changes in labor markets by digital tools, discrimination and harassment issues, lack of knowledge of those people using AI tools. But what I mean with all of this is companies now are not just being held accountable for what they do, but also for how they do things. And this is, I think, one of the things of the questions that you wanted to underline, and it's the ethical use of AI tools and digital tools, right? This is not something that one has to pick up or a company has to apply just because everyone is doing it, because each organization is exposed to different risks, has diverse scopes, a different business, a different market segments, different operations, and the consequence of misuse of these tools can be completely different depending on the company, same as the advantages of the uses of these tools. So the use of these tools, which is great, should be used in a very specific and tailor-made way in companies, right? The use of technology and digital tools should not become an excuse to just doing anything in the name of making something more efficient, but it should be a game changer for trust and transparency in a company. And that is the ethical use that we can do of AI and digital tools. There are a lot of papers that have been written. I want to underline OECD principles on AI, which are really, there are 5 principles. They are easygoing principles, but they are super clear of what is an ethical use of AI. They speak about sustainability, about the respect for human values and human rights, about trustworthiness, transparency and explainability, security and safety, accountability. So that is a document that companies should take into account when talking about the ethical use of AI. And last but not least, and again, related to the ethical use of AIs, I always like to see these as 2 sides of the same coin. So you can approach the question in this way: the role of AI in the compliance framework and the compliance role in the AI framework, right? So one of the things is how you apply AI and digitalization to your compliance program to make it more efficient, more transparent, more traceable, better in terms of reporting. And the other side of the coin is how compliance joins teams in your company that are working on AI tools to make those teams a lot more ethical and transparent, taking care of data privacy, security, confidentiality. So that is another way that I like to see the matter as a 2-sided coin.
Thank you. That's such exciting information. I've been capturing some of your quotes. I think there's lots of quotes there. So for people just to get their heads around, I'd like to move to Uche now. And Uche, in terms of practical compliance in capital markets, so we have a lot of, and I see in the chat function, thank you for that, lots of people from the capital markets here today. So a question to you, you have worked extensively in internal control and in capital markets operations, but what are some ways that you found digital tools can strengthen transparency and compliance in capital markets and specifically in corporate actions? How do you use those tools?
Thank you very much, Caroline, for that very important question. And I would like to situate my perspective on the ways digital tools can help strengthen transparency and compliance in the capital market, and probably, I would say, in the entire corporate world, from two perspectives. One, I see two use cases, one in transaction monitoring, whether for the purpose of detecting fraud or for the purpose of identifying what we call suspicious transactions that are going through the organizations. Another one is the perspective of legal entity identification, which is a key component of what operators in the capital market and indeed the corporate world have a responsibility to work on. Now, talking about the relevance and the use of digital tools in strengthening transparency and compliance in the corporate world, I would, especially as it relates to transaction monitoring, I would say that digital innovations, they provide unprecedented opportunities to strengthen internal controls, enhance transparency, they detect irregularities in real time, and they reduce the scope for discretionary decision-making that can sometimes be error-prone and may, in some cases, enable corrupt practices by those who are even meant to help to use this system to monitor transactions. So digitalization can help to provide opportunities to strengthen the controls around transparency in this area. The second area I see a lot of benefits from digital tools is that digital technologies lend themselves to proactive risk detection for operators. They lend themselves to pattern analysis in vast data sets and automated transaction monitoring systems that can operate continuously at scale. You can imagine an operator in the capital market or in the larger corporate world that processes hundreds of thousands of transactions every day, and these are happening from different channels. Very many transaction channels at different locations, but there is a need and imperative for them to ensure that the transactions that run to their systems do not go and create exposure to the world, to the corporate world, the economic world, by way of financial crimes, money laundering, terrorist financing, or whatever. The amount of data set that is involved is so huge, and the risks that come out of this are quite enormous. Digital tools enable these organizations to be able to proactively identify these risks through pattern analysis over such large data sets that keep increasing over time. This you cannot do when you use manual processes or you use very medium scale technologies to run it. Now, digital tools also improve the effectiveness of due diligence processes beyond the reach of traditional compliance systems. AI-enabled digital technologies can analyze communications, financial transactions, and third-party relationships with high precision, identifying red flags and corruption risks before they materialize. So what we see today, about 15, 10, 20 years ago, many of the organizations in the financial markets, financial industry, had some algorithms, some systems, automations that have certain rules which will be used to look at transactions on an post-factor basis. Over time, with the enhancement in technology, AI is being deployed to even improve the scope of technology used in transaction processing, where machine learning that adapts from what has happened in the past and enhances the algorithms and logic of the transaction monitoring system is enabling higher precision decision-making, enabling identification of red flags in a better and more accurate manner, and also interfacing this with a wide array of data, communications, etc., whether on the internet or through government registries, where you have beneficial ownership of companies, etc. The integration of all these wouldn't be possible in a manual system or in a system that is not enabled with the type of technology AI today that exists. This is going to be a game changer for capital market operators and indeed the wider corporate world as we navigate the challenges of the world going forward. These technologies also can empower stakeholders to access, analyze, and act upon information with unprecedented speed and precision, helping to ensure that both institutions and individuals are held accountable. So it goes beyond the scope of the compliance team. Is say a capital market operator being able to analyze transactions that have occurred. It enables individuals, if you like, regulatory authorities, if you like, talk about the internal auditors in the of the organization, to be able to also have access, gather all the information, and ensure, because the results are coming out from algorithms that the AI has already been implanted with. Output is coming out, enabling the users to be able to know what is going on and be able to hold individuals, even the team in the compliance team, the team in the audit team, or whoever accountable. This would ensure that everyone comes to the table with a very clean hand and that people are doing what they're expected to do. Transactions coming into the systems are the appropriate transactions and not transactions intended to fuel or fund money laundering, terrorist financing, or proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Digital technologies also enable organizations navigate a more interconnected economy, under which they are under rising pressure from regulators, investors, and consumers to uphold ethical standards and ensure clean supply chains. What they do is to leverage digital technologies and proactively address risks, enhance compliance processes, and establish more resilient and accountable governance structures. Digital technologies also enable faster data-driven investigations and audits by detecting anomalies, automating analysis, and identifying irregular behavioral patterns, helping the organizations to prevent and respond to misconduct more proactively and effectively. So that's a lot that happens in the realm of transaction monitoring system using digital technologies. But as I said, there's another perspective also to what digital technologies and tools are beginning to enable the capital market operators. And this is in the area of legal entity identifications. So we have the implementation of legal entity identifiers that enable precise identification of legal entities participating in financial and commercial activities. The global legal entity identification was called for and driven by the G20 and the Financial Stability Board after the 2008 stock market crash. The legal entity identifiers, or LEIs, are issued by local operating units and are created by the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, GLEIF. Legal entity identifiers enable unique characteristics. In other words, no organization can be assigned more than one entity. If an organization that has been assigned this LEI code, a 20-character number, were to cease to be in existence, that code or number will not be assigned to another entity just because of the lack of existence of the initial entity to which it was assigned. It's also exclusive to the extent that an entity cannot obtain another one. So there won't be a situation where an entity has obtained one legal entity number and move on to another one. They could port from one operator to the other, but under no circumstance would an entity have two numbers. This ensures an entity remains what it is and can be identified and followed through their life cycle and even thereafter. And therefore, they realize that whatever actions they take in terms of good governance, good practices, will be attributed to them and only them. LEIs contribute positively to financial crime measures, and because they enhance transparency, they facilitate risk assessments, and help in screening capabilities for the capital market operators. They help in identifying beneficial ownerships, especially when you integrate this with government agency registration of corporate entities and bring this into your verifications of transactions over time. You know when a beneficial ownership is involved in any transaction from wherever source is happening from and every time. Legal entity identifiers also help to enforce sanctions where entities begin to move, try to change the names, etc. The code remains what it is for as long as they exist or even they cease to exist. So there is a lot to gain from digital technology in terms of improving transaction monitoring, in terms of improving transparency and strengthening compliance. But in spite of the immense benefits from digital technology, there are a whole lot of concerns and issues. My colleague, Maria, talked a little bit about this also earlier in her presentation, issues around data privacy and security, issues about digital divide in compliance capabilities, whether in terms of geography or in terms of segments of the economy, the commercial entity, the small and medium scale enterprises versus the corporates, the large corporates. There are issues about digital skill gaps in terms of what people know today and what is required in the emerging world of advancement in technology. In terms of regulatory fragmentation, because there are so many regulations around digital technology in different countries, some of which may not be completely aligned to what should help to drive the global economy in the months and years ahead. There are also issues around digital AI sovereignty in terms of what AI solutions developed in one country we use in another country that hasn't advanced to that level of AI capabilities. There are issues around surveillance and authoritarian abuse, where the information and digital technology may also be subjected to abuse by some users. There are concerns about job displacement by the operators in the capital market and the larger corporate. Issues around algorithmic bias and discrimination, and on in terms of the concerns raised. And it is for these reasons about the benefits as well as the issues that we have with digital technology that there are two key enhancements that are imperative. One, we need to promote the adoption of international frameworks for the responsible use of technology in anti-corruption and integrity measures. And two, we need to promote the use of digital identity integrity tools such as LEIs to enhance transparency. So, Caroline, I think this would be my perspective in terms of how digital tools are helping to enhance transparency, but also with the concerns and issues around digital tools and how we need to deal with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a lot of food for thought. It really certainly bridges from what Maria was saying into, as you say, the practical application in corporates and capital markets. And there's so much information. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. Managed to provide some responses to the questions, and of course using AI to provide the answers. So we need the thought leaders just to confirm that those really are the answers. And I loved your mention of AI sovereignty, and I really want to come back to that, because that we need to have a look at specifically the B20 and the B20's recommendations to the G20 on AI sovereignty and every nation's ability to independently develop and control and regulate and deploy AI technologies. But I know Renaldo is there, and Renaldo, I really want to ask you the next question, and that's specifically around the governance. And we have got a very large governance and leadership community online today. So when it comes to strategic compliance and governance, from your perspective, how can organizations align digital compliance tools with the broader business development and regulatory goals that they have?
So thank you very much, Caroline. So good morning to all of you, for colleagues from here from South America. Good afternoon and good night to all the audience. Yeah, so it's a very pleasure to be here. I also participate in this webinar. I would like to thank very much the chairs from the B20 Integrity Compliance Task Forces, Huaida and Ashley from Deloitte, who kindly invite us also to the discussion. Yeah. I think that Maria and Ukti quite broadly explained all the benefits to use technologies. Yeah, and there's several ways to implement technologies for compliances. Yeah, there are several different ways to do it correctly, but there's one way to do it wrongly. Yeah, that's separate from the business. Yeah, so. The usually business are implementing nowadays several new technologies, not only AI, but different type of technologies related to traceability. When you go to transportations, when you go to customer behaviors, when you go to even internal transactions monitoring, as very well explained, when we take, for example, travel and expenses, costs, procurement, donations, sponsorships, and therefore there's several fields where technology is being broadly implemented and broadly utilized by the business. Yeah, and the compliance organization need to look to all these potential utilizations of technologies and to understand mainly the risks related to that. Yeah, and since you identify the risks, yeah, the B20 teams, yeah, also looking for that, yeah, and make some recommendations or some recommendations regarding the ethical utilization of technologies. Yeah, and our very first recommendations is exactly as Uk very well mentioned. That's encourage the adoption of international frameworks for responsible use of technologies, not only in anti-corruption and for also for integrity measures. Yeah, and for that we needed to take in consideration several things. Yeah, first of all, that's we need to embed the ethical standards for responsible use of technologies, digital technologies. What does it mean? It means that the actions that you implement also need to not only to foster or to make their business more agile, but also to do it in a very ethical way. Yeah, of course you need to communicate and to train your team related to that. The private sector is always incentivized to adopt these new technologies. Yeah, but you also need to think about your ecosystems. Yeah, you need to think about your small and medium enterprise that are connected to this ecosystem. And also you need to think about the potential public and private collaboration for that, because in this digital world you need to use several data that's not only belongs to your company, yeah, but it's also belong to the entire society. Yeah, but for that, of course, there's a lot of challenges. Yeah, most of these challenges still do not have a clear answer up to now. Yeah, we have seen some successful implementation of some governance, international governance related to that, like the well-known European Union GDPR that was broadly implemented not in Europe but across the world. Yeah, but if you look, yeah, for some new ways or the new uh, regulations related to artificial intelligence, for example, yeah, I think that even the European Act related to artificial intelligence was have some challenges related to that. Yeah, we see some new measures from interesting measures from China, like this interim measures for management of generative AI services. Yeah, we also see some very interesting initiatives from Saudi Arabia, like the Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority. Yeah, and even the United Nations through the UNESCO, they have some recommendations on ethics of AI. Yeah. I think that Maria pointed out a very interesting principles from the OECD that need to be understood and also implemented and followed. Yeah, but there is still a lot of things to do, or I think that we have more questions of nowadays that really answers it. But to be precise, yeah. Come back to your question, Caroline. I think that it's very important that companies, yeah, embedded in their code of conducts, yeah, these new challenges related to technologies. Yeah, if not only the code specific conduct for technologies, yeah, but also from the business principles. Yeah, we need to look to these international frameworks, yeah, and to have a closed and diligent observation on that. Of course, all of us we are concerned that these regulations could not be, let's say, over-regulated or stop the developers of new technologies. Yeah, velocities or that to be agile is very important in this field. But as I mentioned, yeah, the correct way is that the governance systems work hand on hand with the new technologies implemented by the business. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to launch a poll quickly, just around where people see themselves and their organizations in terms of managing the ethics of AI. I think it's a topic that's coming through quite a lot. So I'm just going to launch that poll, and if people can fill in where they think they are and the level of, and there's choice 6 if you don't want any of the others. So I think we've got a very good grounding, and I'm just going to go off script a little bit. to say, just from a personal perspective, and also in terms of input into the policy setting that the B20 is putting together for the G20. And I know that's still a work in progress. I think the G20 meets in September later on this year. But if I can just ask all of you, maybe starting with you, Maria, what do you think the G20 should be thinking about in terms of, specifically what you've been raising?
No, I think, Caroline, that it's a little bit of what we have been saying. I think Reynaldo just pinpointed something that is key, I believe, for the development of AI and the ethical use of AI, which is private and public sector working together. That is key. It's just how Reynaldo closed his question. And I believe that, again, as Reynaldo said, there are many good uses of AI and digital tools, and there's only one bad use, or there is only one way to not use it properly. I believe that G20 has to set up, or it would be good if they set it up a sort of general framework, a general framework for G20 members to implement safe and ethical internal frameworks, meaning regulation about AI. There's a paper about OECD, which is very, very interesting, which is on the principles, but an updated version of the principles, where OECD goes through a number of examples of different countries that have implemented some sort of regulation, and they do all the analysis. I think that's key. The fact that we share that information so as to be able to see what is doing our partner, the country next door or the country on the other continent, that's also key in order to build a strong ethical framework. And you know what, and this is something that we have spoken at the task force, G20 members, there are differences between G20 members in terms of regulation, in terms of frameworks, financial frameworks, ethical compliance or integrity frameworks, anti-corruption, money laundering. So G20 should promote some sort of minimal standards so that we can all speak the same language and start from the same baseline, and from there start building strong systems.
And moving to Reynaldo, then, when you're talking about the corporate side of things, taking those recommendations and applying them to a corporate sector, what does that mean for the organizations in the countries that are adopting? Is that something that would promote the equitability, I guess, in terms of AI and access to AI for the organizations?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, Caroline, considering that most of the regulators are taking care about the market concentrations, or really looking for antitrust perspective, saying that, there's a lot of market concentration in one specific field because of their data collection, or because of the data power. Yeah, I think that the corporates need to put the customer in the center of the discussion. Yeah, if you have a fair treatment about the customer, if you have a fair and transparent way that showing that you are using the data in a correct way, and you are charging a fee, or if you're not charging a fee, why you're not charging that fee, because we are taking advantage of that information. That is key for the customers, and they have a good feeling about a good service related to that data. Yeah, I think that the main challenge that we have nowadays is that the governments are trying to control this concentration of the market. That's quite normal. Yeah, and the way that usually the governments react to that. Yeah, but it's quite impossible, I would say, because of the markets change completely from day to night, and it's dramatically changed also the concentration of the markets. Yeah, and we need to really put the customer on the focus, on the central point of that. Yeah, and that's, I think, that is a good way that the G20 governments could look to that, and of course put some barriers, and also charge some wrongdoers from some specific platforms that are not using the data correctly or are not going to be transparent enough with the customer. Yeah, but I think that we need to move more from an antitrust perspective to a more customer-centric discussion about the utilization of technologies.
Thank you. And I think what you're talking about in terms of the managing of the ethics, do you think that countries are equipped to be able to really oversee ethics? And given that ethics is, you know, and we're in the integrity and compliance, and it's almost like two sides of the one coin, is that compliance is very rules-based and integrity is very behavior-based, and ethics of AI is quite behavior-based. So do we have in a government what it takes to really manage behavior as opposed to compliance with laws, do you think? And I'm posing it to you, Reynaldo. Sorry.
Yeah, very interesting and very challenging questions. I may say instantly no, yeah, because as governments are very strict and very also rule-based, and usually the main challenges related to governments is that they are based on some very strict governance. Not governance, but based in some very defined
Rules.
framework. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. I think that the where we really need to look to that is that the governments also need to invest to provide transparency and reliable data. Yeah, is really key. Yeah, it's not very common that the government understand that they have a very powerful tool in their hands, that there's data from the entire populations or from the entire market. Yeah, and as well as they implemented a very transparent database from not only from their the population, but the economy and the society. Yeah, the better it's going to be for the technology companies from their countries. Yeah, to develop a new economy based on data. Yeah, that's really a challenge. That's not very well perceived because everyone would like to take the responsibility from this data, and of course that's a responsibility from the governments also to keep the privacy and also to keep the this information very well secured. Yeah, and then of course everyone is concerned about this leak of this information. Yeah, but at the same time, there's this trade-off that we are going to see in the near future, because the governments that don't move to these digital markets will really be will have a big disadvantage in the near future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Caroline, so
yes, please, Maria. Yes.
If I may add something to what Reynaldo said, if we remember, last year OECD launched the integrity or compliance or anti-corruption outlook, and analyzing OECD member countries in terms of integrity, anti-corruption, and compliance frameworks and regulation, you could see in that outlook that you went from regulation implementation to monitoring, and it decreased in the number of countries that had that. So most of the countries had the regulation. A good number of countries had implemented some sort of anti-corruption system, but the monitoring thing was the weakest one, and was the work to be done was there. So I believe that in line what Reynaldo said, all the monitoring has to be or should be strengthened at this moment.
And who better to talk about internal controls than Uche? How do you think that governments can start shifting their frame of reference from lawmaking to actually monitoring and oversight? Do you think they've got what it takes from an internal control perspective?
Yeah, I think they do. Most of you see, when you talk about the government, it's about government using the agencies of the government. If you're talking about, say, the financial markets, you have the stock exchange. If you're talking about the banks, you have the central banks or the prudential regulatory authorities. There are so many agencies, even the anti-corruption agencies in many of the countries exist, and they have the capabilities. Many of them are being trained, and they already can get more and more training. But again, this is where the organizations like the G20 come in. The G20 has 60% of the world population, 80% of the global GDP. The G20 has been a pace setter in driving economic innovation, policy innovation, etc. So the G20 can work in harmony with these governments in the various countries, and again, working with the agencies of the government to be able to enhance capacity and implement all these things we talk about. They are not, I don't see them as things, the paraphernalia of governments in the various countries cannot do using their agencies. What they need to do is to invest in the human resources by way of capacity building. But again, from the G20 and the sovereign levels, to also tweak the regulatory frameworks for all this to happen. We talk about AI. It's just coming from all angles. There is need for some symmetry somewhere, where a direction is coming that is this represents, so to say, a global gold standard for what it is to implement AI. And just like you have the Basel II for the banks, etc., there is a standard defined, and the various countries now go about domesticating them through their regulatory authorities. We can drive this through the G20 and move it to all the countries as appropriate. I think it's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke about AI sovereignty. I'm not going to let you get away with that one. And specifically, maybe my question is more around the African markets, the African capital markets and the stock exchanges. And do you think the use of AI, if we get AI sovereignty in Africa, that we can actually be more competitive as capital markets and stock exchanges by leveraging the capabilities of AI?
Yeah. See, AI sovereignty is not an absolute sovereignty. It's just like I say, the prudential regulations under Basel II. It's not absolute. There is a framework defined by an internationally accepted body represented by various countries. They came out and defined the standards in a similar way. The AI framework, there are people who want sovereignty. They need to have some guardrails, some principles defined as to what it takes for a responsible use of AI, what it takes in terms of data privacy, what it takes in terms of issues around intellectual property, what it takes in terms of storage, what it takes in terms of protection of rights of individuals to seek information as they need, and on and on and on. So that's definition of what we can call the gold standard, enabling countries to now go back and domesticate in the light of their peculiar circumstances, but of course defining beyond which point such domestication makes a nonsense of what is the guiding principle, because this is a global economy that is interrelated and interconnected, where there are weaknesses in one area because of the fact that somebody has so diluted the standards, and then it's certainly going to affect everybody in the value chain. So for me, it's a combination of sovereignty, the sovereignty defined based on some understanding of gold standards, and which will be adjudicated in the various countries by responsible government agencies that have the capacity to implement such sovereignty in those areas. That would be my perspective.
Thank you, Uche. Great insights, because what we really have is we have essentially the AI cowboys, the developers, the go-getters, the innovators, really, they're providing, the world as it's going to be, the future view. And then on the other side, you've got the countries that are trying to say, oh, what's in the interest, as you say, interest of the greater whole, what's in the interest of people, how do we protect people from this innovation? So we've got quite an argy-bargy that's heading its way. And here we actually realizing it, and we're feeling it in the business community. And that's why the B20 is actually the ideal vehicle to have this discussion and to guide policy when it comes to the G20, because you do represent, the AI cowboys, but you also represent that the frameworks and the consideration of the more regulation and control to protect the whole. So I think this is a really important conversation, and certainly something that goes into the into the policy setting. I'm going to go back to my script now. So Maria, specifically AI in compliance. So business community, what is the role of AI in your companies or in generally in companies' compliance frameworks? We heard a little bit in the capital markets, and I provided some feedback there. And then how do you, and we heard about that actually most people are not, let me just bring up those poll results again.
Sure.
They're still up. I'd say, what have we got? 20, 30, 40% have either not got any AI ethics of AI oversight and or have just started the process. And the 40% are also saying it's early days. So we've got 80% saying that, look, this is really early days for us. So what are your recommendations around that?
Recommendations would be, first of all, consider your company. It's something that you have to do tailor-made. As I said in the beginning, each company is different. It's exposed to different risks. It's got a different size, a different economic impact. So that's one thing. Second thing, when you implement AI tools, and I will give specific examples of how we did it at YPF, you have to, first of all, identify the risk of the area, of the part of your compliance program where you are implementing that tool, so as to see what happens if it goes wrong. Then you have to do it in a controlled environment. That means you first of all have to build whatever tool you are thinking of. You have to test it with internal clients and with your own team, and only then, after a period of testing and educating that tool into what you want, then only then you can launch it. And then, of course, after the immediate launch, you have to go through a very strict monitoring process or period of time, so as to make sure that whatever you did and whatever worked during the pilot version of the tool is effectively working when the tool has been launched and is being used by either you in the compliance or you and maybe a business area. In that sense, we have 3 different tools at the moment, all of which we developed them with the IT team. So these are internal developments based on ideas from my team, from the compliance team. So one of them, of course, is a chatbot, which is called Ethos. And so we answer more basic questions of the compliance programs, like what is a conflict of interest? Should I declare the conflict of interest? What are the reporting channels? How do I reach the reporting channels? How do I reach the compliance team to make a live report? Basic questions.
Using AI to teach the ethics of AI.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Second, what we did is a AI transaction control tool. In terms of our third parties program, what we do before having a commercial relation with a third party is we map that third party, whether it's a person or a company, and we classify that third party based on a risk matrix. So, for example, Caroline has been assigned a high risk classification. So based on that, we have specific mitigation actions for our commercial relationship. So that's the pre-analysis. The post-analysis is the AI tool where we integrated your profile based on that pre-analysis or that due diligence process where we classified you as a high-risk third party. And we integrated that information with our ERP, which is SAP, with all the information from the commercial relationship. We set up a list of 6 algorithms that bring me red flags. So if your relationship with all the documentation that we have integrated in those systems brings or picks up or lights up any of those red flags, then we can directly go to your commercial relation and go further into the analysis on what's happening that red flag appeared. This is updated every day at 6 p.m. So we have live information on our third parties programs and the transactions of the company. And we also have different indicators of all those transactions that have been, that have lit up red flags, saying how much money does that mean for the company, how many third parties there are, how many commercial relationships there are, what's the length of that contract, and stuff like that. And the third tool that we are working on, it's again for the third parties program. And when the business is going to start a commercial relationship with some third party, they usually ask they ask every time they ask a due diligence process to the compliance team based on this risk matrix. So we have a sort of template of the memo that we send the business area with all the findings, of course, based on public information. So what we are doing is working on a tool that would bring all that public information based, again, on specific red flags, build that memo based on our template so as to provide the business with that memo with all the profile of that third party based on public information a lot faster than if we do it manually and we go through the analysis ourselves. And last but not least, what we did last year was we digitalized all the management of the compliance program. So we have a big compliance dashboard where we have all the information on trainings, on declarations of conflict of interest, on reports, on third parties programs. So we can we filter that information and we can know if Caroline accepted the code of ethics, when she accepted the code of ethics, which trainings she took, whether those trainings were virtual or in-person trainings, if she did the e-learning, if Caroline has reported any breach of the compliance of the code of conduct. So everything, and that helps me, given that I report monthly to the CEO of the company and quarterly to the board of the company, that dashboard allows me to bring, like just pressing a button, all the information from a month, from a quarter, from a semester, or from the year, from the compliance program.
Brilliant. It really helps a lot. Automates all of the manual tasks. There's a couple of critical enablers there, data being one, accurate data, having access to accurate data. I can imagine that on the other side, the human rights people are going to talk about surveillance. You know, how much surveillance is good and how much actually oversteps the mark. I remember the discussion around privacy and the right to actually die on data terms. So I can imagine that with AI, we're going to start getting these conversations happening as well, and trying to remove a personal information from something that's been highly summarized, and those AI bots is going to be really difficult as well. Just like trying to change from one blockchain system or technology to another, practically impossible.
Well, for example, Caroline, in the team, the investigations team and the information that the investigations team has is kept in a different hard disk, and the rest of the compliance team does not have access to reports and investigations, given the, I would say, the confidentiality that we have to keep about those reports. We really do respect those things in a very, very strong way, so as not to have any trouble later on.
So you've given examples of actually how you've developed and using AI technologies. Maybe going to Uche, are there any specifically most promising digital innovations for strengthening internal controls or even digital misconducts? Have you seen any? There's so many AI tools, right? But have you any specific innovations that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, once again. I would say in the earlier part of my discussion with you, we talked about two innovations. We talked about transaction monitoring for detecting fraudulent or suspicious transactions. We talked about the legal entity identification. Those are important tools. But I would like to talk about here, because in the limited time, on a third tool I think is gaining prominence and which people are talking very significantly about. This is with respect to implementation of a digitally enabled and secure, inclusive whistleblower platform for reporting integrity breaches. That is an area.
For reporting?
Talking about a digitally enabled, secure, and inclusive whistleblower platform for reporting integrity breaches. Because we see that despite the vital role and that potential whistleblowers often remain silent due to fear of retaliation, lack of confidential channels, or mistrust in the fairness of reporting systems. This is in spite of the vital role that whistleblowing plays, and people are aware of. So a secure digital whistleblower platform would offer anonymous, confidential, and user-friendly environments for reporting misconduct. And such a secure platform would create a culture of trust and would enable people to raise concerns confidentially with the belief that the organization is committed to ethical conduct and serious about addressing matters of ethical conduct. When you come to an AI-driven digital driven system, it can analyze whistleblower reports. It can identify patterns and anomalies that might indicate systemic issues within the organization. In other words, it's not just about having an opportunity for people to report. It's also being able to use the information or analysis of the data of previous reports to be able to make some decisions to make the organizations better and to move forward. I'll give an example. Siemens implemented such a system on their whistleblower program, and they used it effectively. As a result, because they were addressing root causes coming out of the reports, they have seen 30% decrease in compliance violations. Because typical whistleblower programs that we know about today involve making calls to dedicated telephone numbers with recording facilities and ask people to say what they want to say there, or writing written complaints and sending them maybe without signatures or whatever. These do not provide enough anonymity, as people still fear that their voices or their writing styles, etc., could be deciphered and could lead to probable victimization. Also, the individuals with responsibility for evaluating the complaints under such manual environments sometimes may miss out on some of the complaints or mistreat them. So to tap the full benefits of a digitally driven whistleblower program, we should just enhance and enforce a comprehensive protection for the whistleblowers. We promote a secure, anonymous channel, and we should encourage multi-stakeholder cooperation with public and private sector organs to build this in the system that ensure that adequate legal protection for whistleblowers exist. We should invest in the capacity building process and training as well as create digital literacy to enable potential whistleblowers to use the platforms effectively. We should also develop and strengthen capacity for internal audit functions to effectively use these platforms in the investigative and reporting work. So I think it is very important in terms of this innovation of using digital solutions. It's very important that we seek ways to leverage the opportunities provided by advancement in digital technology by establishing secure and inclusive digitally driven whistleblowing platforms for suspecting or reporting suspected breaches. That, I think, is a sure way to ensure required protection for reporting persons is provided and is guaranteed. Thank you.
Thanks, Uche. I know we're running out of time, but here's a question from somebody who knows. She's the CEO of the Ethics Institute and co-founder of the Whistleblowing House, which many South African whistleblowers subscribe to and make use of. And she's asking, even though people can report anonymously, do you have any tricks and tips on how to ensure that the organization doesn't try to identify the whistleblower instead of actually investigating the complaint? So it's really a trust issue, isn't it?
Exactly. And that is the point about having it to be digitally driven. And when you have the framework for responsible use of technology, which is the overarching principle that will guide all of this, one of the principles will be that when you go into this digitally driven solution, that it doesn't leave footprints of the person that reported. In other words, person logs in. It doesn't have to say it was reported by Mr. Uche or Mrs. Caroline or whatever. So people just log in, state what they want to state. It's up to the organization to review. So the capability to put a digital footprint is taken out of this, creating the required anonymity. When people are writing or making calls, their voices could be deciphered, their writing styles could be deciphered, but they can just go there, clicks on this, or type what they want to type. It can even be some drop-down buttons. What is the nature of the complaint? This, it picks on this. And without creating a digital footprint for the user that's making this complaint. I think that's the key component of the responsible use of technology that should be defined as a framework for the implementation of such digitally driven whistleblower frameworks. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Uche. And I know we've run out of time, but a last question for Ronaldo. I can't let you go. And Maria, you wanted to say, and I'll give Ronaldo the last word then.
Yeah, sorry, Ronaldo. No, just one thing to add to what Uche said. There are two things that I believe that are key for keeping anonymity, and it's communication and trainings. You have to tell the organization what you expect when you make a report. You have to talk to them about the anonymity, the importance of the anonymity, the importance of confidentiality, because many times what happens is you make a report, Caroline, and then you go to your mate at the next office and say, like, you know what, I made a report about this and that. And so that's the way you most probably lose confidentiality and anonymity. So key things, communications and trainings, so that the people in your organization know what you're expecting from them in terms of respect to confidentiality and anonymity.
Thank you. So Ronaldo, I'm going to take a leadership perspective here. We've got leaders are most often the older generation. We haven't conquered the intergenerational diversity on boards yet. So they need a lot more training. This is new terminology, AI, etc. This is a new world for them, whistleblowing, digital enablement, chatbots, etc. What is your key message to governing bodies, to leadership of organizations today, and navigating not only this, but also the regulations that are coming through around this, the frameworks?
Sure. To be very precise, because of the time, Caroline, I think that you split this webinar in very well organized two separate blocks. Yeah, the first one, I think that the boards need to foster, to accelerate, to incentivize, to really to bring all the attention to technologies and really go closer to the business, and they really incentivize the correct utilization of technologies, as we discussed in the first part. Yeah. But in the second part, we clearly said that there are some specific fields, like when you go to protect your brand, when you have industry secrecy, or everything related to intellectual property, yeah, that you really need to take care and really to protect it in a very correct way, because technologies could also bring an additional threat on that. Yeah, and I like very much the points discussed by Uchi and Maria, because whistleblowers' information is really key to be protected. Yeah, and that's very clear stated in our recommendation that we need to establish secure and inclusive digital-driven whistleblower platforms. Yeah, for reporting the suspect integrity breach. It's very important to understand that the whistleblower is not a hero. Whistleblowers are not heroes. Yeah. Very unfortunately, a lot of films from Hollywood always shows the whistleblowers as one very important person, and so on and so forth. But the large majority of the whistleblowers come from some areas that are very unprotected. Yeah, women specifically has a specific protection when they are whistleblower related to some sort of harassment. Yeah, they cannot have their identity disclosed in any sense. Yeah, because the whistleblowing process is very critical. Yeah, of course, as Maria said, there are some people who would like to show up. Yeah, but also these individuals need to understand that the investigation process is a long and a very unsecure way that we are going through it. Yeah, so the protection of the whistleblower identity is really key. Yeah, and this is going through technology, because technologies could always give the some sort of information about the whistleblower, but as Maria quite clearly mentioned, it also goes through the process and also our behaviors. Yeah, and therefore, come to our questions, I think that the board and executives they need to balance these two words: foster, incentivize, and accelerate the adoption of technologies, but also take into consideration that the protection of some specific data is extremely important for the organization.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for a fabulous webinar today. Thank you for the attendees online. Please show your support with the emojis. We'd love to hear your and see your reactions. It's been lovely having everybody online. I know we've gone over time a little bit, but I hope that you found value in today's webinar. Thank you so much to the speakers, our co-chairs of this task force today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Yeah.